Hey, this is Shaki from Atomos. I've got the brand new Shinobi GO that has just released. I'm going to quickly take you through how to put this together, pair it up with your camera, and be ready for your next project. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Shinobi GO. So first thing first, we've got the Atomos monitor. Cool. Then we've got a Sony camera over here. Here you can see we are using the Sony a7S III. We've got a monitor mount, the anti-rotational pin. We've also got an HDMI cable. This HDMI cable has a locking mechanism, so nice little fun action so it won't come off. So let's just put this all together and get this started. Monitor. So what we're seeing over here is the Shinobi's UI. I'm going to quickly take you through what we're seeing on this screen. To begin with, on the top left, you can see the resolution and the frame rate it's getting. So it's getting UHD P25. So if I was to explain that to you, it means 4K resolution at 25 frames per second. Over here, you can see we are monitoring it in SDR native, in other words, Rec 709. Now, for those who don't know technical terms, it means a normal video signal that isn't HDR. On your top right, you've got the battery percentage. Right below that, you've got the audio meters showing the left channel and the right channel, and you've got little indicators over there showing with numerical values where your audio levels are sitting at. Right on the bottom, you've got your tools that you can toggle on or off. And this view over here is a pretty awesome view because you get to see your image without any tool overlays. But at the same time, on the bottom, you've got your waveform, audio levels, battery, all consolidated into one little strip. If I was to press that back again, you can toggle your tools back on. Over here, you've got the zoom function where you can basically zoom around and see your image. If I was to press that, it'll do a 2x zoom, and if you were to press that back, it'll zoom out. One of my favorite tools is the false color tool. This tool is an incredible tool used for gauging your exposure on your subject. On your left, you can see there's a legend over here that goes from -7 to 109, and they're all color-coded. This basically is the brightness levels of your waveform essentially mapped into a color-coded form. So instead of looking at a waveform, you can see your image that's color-coded. If this area is blue, that means it's underexposed. If it's red, it means overexposed. You can see over here, I've intentionally put a light in the background so you can see the brightest source. So if I was to adjust this exposure, that becomes normalized and everything else becomes super dark. And if I was to turn that off, you can see it's a pretty dark image. I have to say that this is a super bright monitor, so looking at this monitor, you'd be like, oh, that looks pretty all right. But actually, it is a really bright monitor, hence why it looks normal. But if I look at my waveform over here, the ultimate source of truth, it's sitting underneath. If I was to adjust that to where we would think it needs to be, somewhere in the middle, that's a healthy looking waveform. You can see nothing is clipping on the top end or on the bottom end. If I was to turn that off and go back to false color, if I was to adjust this aperture, you can see how the colors are changing. Now let's say I want a really bright image. You can see if it hits the red mark, red means it's blown out. If I was to turn that off, you can see it's blown out. So to normalize this, to get it to a healthy looking place, you want it to be somewhere about there. If you look over here, the 50 to 55%, that's salmon pink. That salmon pink is what you want to aim for. And you can see on the leaves, my main subject that I'm focusing on is the leaf, and it's got that salmon pink. And in reality, if the sun was to be in the shot, you can't have the perfect exposure for the sun if that is not your main subject. So in this context, it makes sense for the sun to be brighter than the main subject. So if I was to turn that off, you've got a perfect looking image. Right next to it, you've got the analysis tool. This is an awesome tool for you to look at multiple different tools at the same time. So you've got your waveform on the bottom, you've got your histogram on your right, you've got your vector scope, and then you've got your audio meters. Gets better. You can actually adjust the brightness of this tool. So if I was to bring that down, you can see how the intensity of all that changes. And this is all very responsive to your controls. So when you're changing your exposure, you can monitor it all in the one place. So let me just bring that down. Great. If I was to jump out of that and come onto zebras, this is another way of perfecting getting the exposure that you want for your shot. Essentially, you can go into your settings, go into zebra, and you can see the threshold. It's got a slider with the percentage value. If you was to change that, that gives you how much more room do you want before it starts hitting the zebra mark. So if I was to go down the other way, it's saying at 50%, that's showing that your image hit that threshold of where your brightness is. And if I was to change that to say somewhere between 80 and 90, I'm gonna now change my exposure. And as soon as the zebra comes on, you know, like, okay, that is pretty hot. So I can now adjust that and bring it back, and the zebras have gone. I'm just gonna bring that back so you can see what's happening on this super bright monitor. If I was to turn that off, and let's go into the next one. Same thing, that's a vector scope. If you was to tap that one more time, it gives you the tool on a bigger view, and there is your coordinates of where your color is sitting. Moving on to another super handy tool is the focus peaking. Now, to those who love to have absolute control in manual focus, and now we all know shooting in manual focus, it can be very tricky if you are not very familiar with your lens. So what we've done is we've bought this tool, focus peaking, into your monitor so that you don't have to do any more guesswork when you're pulling focus. If I was to shift my lens barrel and pull focus, you can see how that red is moving along the image. Nice little handy tool to exactly tell you where your focus is sitting. Obviously, this focus peaking tool is only a monitoring, so obviously it won't be hard burnt into your video. You can also adjust the strength of the focus peaking tool, so I can make it really thin and really finesse and get it where I want it to be, or I can even increase that and make it really thick. Awesome little handy tool. You can also change the color to other different colors. So obviously we are now pointing at a green subject, so you want to find something that is contrasting to that color. So in my instance, I've gone with blue, or maybe we could even do red because it'll pop out. You've also got different modes. You can pull focus in black and white. Great way to focus your attention onto focusing. And you've got your outline mode. This is a really cool one. And then you've got enhanced mode, which essentially adds more contrast to your image without any colors also being added. I personally like that one because when I'm on set, I can see exactly where my focus is at. It's just a bit more enhanced, and there's no color introduced to my frame, and it's not distracting me. I'm just gonna go back to normal just for the sake of this exercise. So jumping out, and if I was to turn that off, you now have aspect ratio overlays. Down the bottom, when I tapped it once, it's now showing 16:9. So it is showing me a 16:9 overlay. If I was to tap that again, 9:16. Now we all know if you're shooting for social media, we want to have aspect ratio overlays. So what you are seeing on set is what you're going to see in post. Beauty of it is you're still getting the whole image, but as soon as you put your 9:16 overlay, you know exactly where your frame is sitting. You've got 2:3, and the list goes on. Next up, our rule of thirds. So you can have better composition. Have your subject sitting interesting. You can pan it around. It's a great little way to compose. Or you can just shoot it right dead set center. And lastly, you've got your safe area overlays. And if I was to tap that one more time, so when you have your safe area enabled, you know where you can place your text, your logos, and other things that you would like to place on your screen. So those are the tools. Now, I would also like to show you how you can monitor this image in other different modes. So if you were to tap on, you're monitoring it in SDR native, and obviously you've got the user LUT. And you've also got these other little options that have been grayed out. It's because when you go into input color, it's saying input color is unspecified. What we're shooting today is with the Sony a7S III, so we'll turn on that log signal. So we go like, okay, cool, we're getting a log image. Then you change your camera to Sony. I mean, it's already set to Sony, but you've got a variety of other different cameras embedded into your monitor. The purpose of this is so that when our Atomos monitor is getting the camera signal, it knows how to interpret that for the transformation we're trying to apply. We're sending it S-Log3 because we want to make the most of the camera's dynamic range. So shooting in S-Log3, you're going to get the biggest dynamic range as opposed to shooting in Rec. 709. What people tend to do is shoot in S-Log3, put a Rec. 709 monitoring preview LUT onto it, and then you go into your edit and you have all that flexibility in brightness and in color. And obviously we're shooting in S-Log3 Gamut 3 Cine, and that is the gamut we're shooting in. If I was to turn it off, you can now see right on the top of your head, it says Sony S-Log3 S-Gamut 3 Cine is the image signal we're sending into the Atomos monitor. And if you was to press the monitor, we can now monitor this signal in various different formats based on your intended delivery. So this is HDR, if you want to shoot HDR content. So if you know you're watching your Netflix content or even on TikTok and on YouTube, there are HDR content, and this is essentially the color space you want to be monitoring at. So in HDR, this is what the image looks like. So remember when we were looking at the image earlier over here in SDR native, that was a very flat looking image because what we're looking over there is an S-Log3 image. If I was to press HDR, now we are in an HDR space. If I was to hit HDR PQ, that's also a different variant of HDR, just a bigger space. And you can see obviously it becomes a little bit darker because this is a bigger space. And then you got Rec. 709. In the Rec. 709 world, this image looks super blown out. So what we can do is, again, go back into your false color tool and bring that down to where you want it to sit. So I'm going to keep it for somewhere about here. And I know looking at that, based on the colors, my image is sitting at a pretty good spot in exposure. And if I was to turn that off, you go like, okay, cool. It is sitting where it needs to sit. And if I was to go into use a LUT, essentially you can choose the LUT that you want. Obviously I haven't installed a LUT on it, but I'm gonna show you how it's done. I've got an SD card over here that's got a LUT into it. And I'm gonna plug it in and I'm gonna show you how to get this LUT installed. If I was to go into LUTs, you've got 8 bays over here, so that's 8 different memory slots for you to save your custom LUTs. I've got an S-Log monitoring LUT in my SD card. If I was to go into the folder, it's gonna pull up now the browser where you can see all the different LUTs. We're gonna shoot in this S-Log3 LUT and we're gonna hit load LUT, and you're gonna see it will start installing the LUT. Okay, now that the LUT has been installed, if you hit confirm, you can see we now have a LUT looking image. So you can go back into monitor and you can flick between the different modes. So you got SDR, then remember you got the Rec. 709. So that is your standard S-Log3 to Rec. 709 conversion. We've got our custom look, and if you was to press the custom look, it's got that really stylized cinematic look that we're going after. So if your monitor is rigged upside down, this is a great little tool we've also installed into the monitor where you can flip it upside down. If you were to press that again, it'll go the other way. You can also flip it horizontally. So for people who like to do vlogging, selfie content, that is a great way to look at yourself in a mirror effect. I can also just turn that off. You've got your display where your settings for your display are. You've got your waveform where you can adjust the brightness, the opacity, how big you want them, and how the style of the waveform you want. So if I was to press that, you can see the different styles you can look at the waveform in. I can also change the brightness and make it thinner. I can also adjust the opacity so it's not in the way, or the other way to see it very clearly. Lastly, I forgot to mention, what you're seeing on the bottom over here is the timecode counter. This is coming from your camera via the HDMI cable. It's a nice little way to see where your camera's timecode is sitting at. As you can see, the Shinobi GO is a great on-set tool with easy-to-use monitoring functions. For those of you after advanced monitoring features like touchscreen autofocus and camera control, check out our best award-winning monitor loved by many, the Shinobi II. If you're after recording functions as well, we have the Ninja, Shogun and Sumo 19 available at your local reseller or at Atomos.com.